I'm Ruthie Carter, 64, retired 911 dispatcher from Wake County, North Carolina. I spent 29 years talking panicked people through fires, storms, and the worst 5 minutes of their lives. I still know our fire frequencies by heart. So trust me when I say this. I can tell the difference between help and control. Last Sunday, my niece Brooke arrived with her fiancé and a roll of blue painter's tape. They slapped a care plan on my fridge like a traffic notice. No driving after dusk, quiet hours in my own living room, and their bulldog at the foot of my bed for comfort. They called it safety. It felt like a leash. By midweek, my mailbox key had gone missing, dinner came from apps I didn't order, and I was told to slow down while paying my own electric bill. The world is predatory, they said, as if I hadn't spent decades keeping the world calm. Then an envelope stamped urgent landed on my porch from the clerk of Superior Court. Brooke lifted it with a smile and slid it into her tote. 10 minutes later, I saw her planner open in the sun. Guardianship hearing, ex parte. Bring doctor note. Neighbor affidavits. I took pictures. I called an elder law attorney, froze my credit, changed every password, bought a locking mailbox. I gathered receipts for every late-night charge they ran through my account. Tomorrow, a judge will hear whether I lose the right to my own life. I've walked people through hurricanes. This will just be weather. And before this day is over, someone will be leaving my house. It won't be me. On Monday, their version of help began at 6 a.m. My bedroom door cracked, light fell across my carpet, and Tank, their squat bulldog with a breathing problem, snorted into my room like a John Deere. He calms in thunderstorms, Brooke whispered as if we were in a library. He'll sleep best at the foot of your bed. Tank jumped up and turned twice, plopping onto my quilt like a wrecking ball wearing a fur coat. I got up and made coffee in my quiet kitchen. The care plan glared. I stared back until the coffee maker hissed and smiled and settled into that last strip. Colton wandered in, wearing basketball shorts and the look of a man who hosted a video game marathon in his head all night. He opened my refrigerator, took a swig from the orange juice carton, and said, "Heart-healthy oatmeal at 8? We saw a recipe on TikTok." "You'll survive if I scramble us some eggs," I said, reaching for the skillet I've had since 1982. "Eggs are inflammatory," he said, as if that settled debate for the entire species. By Wednesday, I had a baby gate in my hallway, so Tank doesn't trip you. DoorDash pings on my phone. We'll just handle dinner. It's easier. And a new rule called quiet hours in my own living room, which meant I could not clink a spoon against a bowl from 6:30 to 9:30 as Colton worked from home. Brooke stood at my shoulder while I paid my electric bill online and tut-tutted when I typed my password too quickly. "Slow down," she said, drizzling caution. "That's how people get locked out." Thursday afternoon, I went to the porch to fetch my mail. I've always liked opening mail outside. Sun on the envelopes, breeze in the trees, little paper rectangles of life. I reached into the metal box and felt nothing. I checked the little hook where I keep my key. Empty. Back in the kitchen, I called out, "Has anybody seen my mail key?" Colton looked up from his laptop. I grabbed it. "I'll screen the mail. The world is predatory." I noticed, "But the world is also my mailbox." "Just trying to keep your blood pressure down," he added. He had that way of ending sentences like he'd performed a public service. Friday came with thunderstorms. Tank thundered, too. I listened to rain and thought of all the midnights I had talked scared people through as a dispatcher. You learn whose panic is real and whose is performance. You learn that the person yelling your name may not be your ally. Lightning cracked, the lights flickered, and in the flash, I saw the care plan bright on my refrigerator. Wake, hydrate, do not drive after dusk. Saturday morning, an estate sale truck rattled down our street. I know the sound of its loose bumper because it hits the same pothole and makes the same hollow clunk every time, like a fork dropped into a dryer. I watched it in the reflection of my microwave. It slowed in front of my house, then kept going, but the fact that it slowed there sent a small shiver down my arms. I shook it like a dog shakes off bath water and picked up a pen. I wrote the day's grocery list on a note card from the church. Flour, eggs, milk, pecans. I never buy pecans for pancakes when Brooke's here because she says nuts are calorie dense, as if that's an insult. Just after lunch, a big manila envelope with a red urgent sticker thumped on my porch, the kind of envelope the county uses when they want your attention. Tank barked like a squad of villains had arrived. I opened the door. The envelope had a return address: Clerk of Superior Court, Estates and Guardianship. I picked it up. It felt heavier than the sum of its paper. Brooke's footsteps quickened down the hall. "That looks stressful," she said, reaching. "Let me open that." "I can read," I said, holding it, not unkindly, to my chest. "Legalese can be triggering," she replied. She tilted her head. "It could be one of those scam mailers that look official." "From the courthouse?" I asked. "Oh, you'd be surprised," she said, cheeks shining with reason. She slid the envelope into her tote bag like a magician palming a coin. "Babysit the pot roast, would you?" She disappeared down the hall as if she were doing me a favor. My kitchen looked exactly the same. Fridge full of magnets, sunlight on the linoleum, a bag of onions breathing quietly by the stove. And also like I had stepped onto the wrong set. I stirred the pot roast. I washed my hands. I counted to 10. When I turned back to the island, Brooke's leather planner lay open, a stripe of sunlight across the pages. I don't like snooping. I also don't like drowning. In neat pink ink on this week's Thursday, 9 a.m., guardianship hearing, ex parte, bring doctor note, plus neighbor affidavits. Something cold slipped through me, and it did not stop at my waist. It ran to my feet, then it sprinted back up my spine and sat behind my eyes. I took a picture of the page with my phone. I set the planner exactly as it had been, down to the angle with the sunlight. I turned the roast one more time and whispered to the empty kitchen, "Well, Ruthie girl, now we know what the help looks like." At 6 a.m, before the blue painter's tape had time to gather dust, I slipped on a rain jacket over my pajamas and walked 2 doors down to Darla's house. Darla is a night shift nurse with a throw blanket for every holiday and loud opinions about quiet people. She opened the door barefoot, blinking sleep out of her eyes. "Why are you dressed like a storm cloud?" she asked. "I think I'm about to be legally kidnapped," I said, and that woke her faster than coffee. She poured coffee into a mason jar, slid it across her kitchen table like we were in a diner, and listened to everything. The envelope, Brooke's planner, the missing mail key. When I finished, she rapped the table with a knuckle. "If they filed for guardianship without telling you, that's rotten," she said. "Call the North Carolina Senior Law Helpline, Google elder law attorneys in Wake County, and call your doctor. Ask for a capacity letter. Bring that to court because you are competent. You know where your spare key is. You know who won the Super Bowl in '98. You can recite the county fire frequencies like a hymn." I laughed. It was the Broncos, and that was 98 and 99. I answered 14 calls when that parade shut down downtown Raleigh. Darla pointed at me as if I were Exhibit A. "There, competent. Now go get yourself an attorney who wears flat shoes and eats ignorance for breakfast." By noon, I was sitting in an office above a dry cleaner near the courthouse at a firm called Oak and Park Elder Law. Jillian Park wore flats. She shook my hand and had the kind of eye contact that steadies a person like a handrail on a staircase when your knees wobble. I told her my whole story, some of it twice because my mouth outran my memory, but she took notes like she had all the time in the world. When I was finished, she put down her pen and ticked off items on her legal pad. "First," she said, "we obtain a letter from your physician attesting to your decision-making capacity. Second, you freeze your credit with all 3 bureaus, Equifax, Experian,
TransUnion. We'll do it together before you leave. Third, you change online banking passwords and enable two-factor authentication. Fourth, you buy a locking mailbox and move it to the porch. No one opens your mail except you. Fifth, you do not confront them tonight. We stay calm. Let them keep showing us who they are. I sat up straighter. Do I sound like I'm losing it? You sound like an ex-dispatcher who can smell a bad plan through drywall, she said. People use the language of care to cover control, but the law has its own vocabulary. Let's start there. Dr. Klein, my primary care physician, took me between patients because he's the kind of man who shows up at pancake fundraisers with a skillet and a hairnet. He asked me where we were, what day it was, who the governor is, and why I was there. I gave him the right answers and an extra one he didn't ask for. The address of the old sheriff's office, the route to the county courthouse without hitting a single school zone, the number you dial when someone points a gun at you from the end of the driveway and says it's none of your business. He wrote the letter. He printed it on crisp paper that felt like relief. Back at Oaken Park, Jillian scanned it and smiled at the little beep it made, like a microwave telling you soup is ready. We'll file a response and show up to the hearing. In the meantime, keep documenting. Documenting was not hard. When you live with your ears open long enough, you hear what people would rather you didn't. Tuesday, I heard Colton telling Brooke on the phone that we could get more tax perks if Aunt Ruthie is declared incompetent. Wednesday afternoon, Darla texted me, "An estate sale truck just cruised past your house again. You expecting visitors?" I wasn't. I walked back inside and saw Brooke's laptop open on the dining table, her desktop full of tidy little icons like a line of ducks. 2 tabs were open. One said, "How to list Aunt's home for rent, furnished." The other, "Emergency Guardianship, North Carolina." I don't like snooting. I also don't like my life sold in a Craigslist post. I took pictures of the screen with my phone, then I put the laptop exactly as it had been. I'm tidy like that. That evening, Brooke made a show of chopping vegetables because no manipulation works quite as well as hospitality. She said, "We found a recipe for cauliflower rice. So good, you won't even know it's not rice." I said, "Because it isn't." I was done pretending food was something it wasn't, in the same way I was done pretending care was control.
The night before the hearing, I ironed my church suit, the navy one with the pearl buttons, and set out my blue folder. I included Dr. Klein's letter, screenshots of the planner and the laptop tabs, my bank statements with 3 mysterious Zelle transfers to Colton marked reimbursed aunt, and an Amazon order for a chew collection that had arrived at 2 in the morning. I added a picture of the care plan on my fridge because sometimes the thing speaks its own indictment. Then I made myself a glass of iced tea, sat on my porch, and listened to the wind move the pine trees like the ocean. Darla texted, "I'll be at the courthouse steps at 8:40 with a granola bar and judgment." I texted back a heart. In the morning, the courthouse smelled like paper and nerves and that nervous breath people take when they're about to hand their life to a person in a robe. Jillian's flats clicked in a steady rhythm on the tile. Brooke stood near a water fountain wearing a cardigan that might have been chosen specifically to say, "I am reasonable." Colton scrolled his phone with his thumb. He looked startled when he saw me. Brooke waved as if we'd met by accident at a farmer's market. "You made it," she chirped. "I didn't invite you," I said. Inside, Judge Alvarez sat with her hair in a bun like a ballerina who'd traded point shoes for a gavel. Her voice was velvet over steel. "Case of N. Ray Carter, guardianship petition," the clerk announced. Brooke went first. She talked about safety and confusion and how predatory the world is. She said I'd left the stove on last fall, conflating a timer malfunction with negligence. She said I was overwhelmed by mail, conveniently leaving out that she held the key to my mailbox in her cute little tote bag. Jillian stood when it was our turn and handed the judge a stack so thin and heavy it could have been a sword.
She didn't raise her voice. She didn't call anyone a liar. She said, "Your Honor, Ms. Carter is competent. Here is Dr. Klein's letter. Here are screenshots of the petitioner's planner referencing an ex parte hearing with no notice to Ms. Carter. Here are screenshots of tabs on the petitioner's laptop, renting Ms. Carter's home, guardianship procedures. Here are bank records showing transfers from Ms. Carter's account to petitioner's fiancé. Here is an Amazon order for Chews at 2:06 a.m. charged to Ms. Carter. This is not care, this is control and financial misuse dressed as concern." Colton blurted, "She leaves the stove on!" Jillian didn't blink. "Here is a receipt for a stove timer Miss Carter purchased after a single mishap. She documented, she adapted, she drove herself here." Judge Alvarez read like she was not to be rushed. Finally, she looked up, and her eyes were not unkind. She said, "Petition denied. Miss Carter, you remain your own decision maker." She turned to Brooke and Colton. "Any interference with Miss Carter's mail or accounts ends today. Counsel, advise your client of her options. If unwanted interference continues, Ms. Carter may pursue a no trespass order and seek protection under elder exploitation statutes." Jillian touched my elbow under the table, and it felt like someone had set a hand on my back during a storm. We stepped into the hallway. Brooke caught up with tears blooming on cue. "Aunt Ruth, we were scared. You've been so forgetful." I asked, "What did I forget?" She opened and closed her mouth like a fish tasting air. "Life is complicated." I know. I've sat with people in their worst 5 minutes for 29 years. I know what complicated looks like. That afternoon, Jillian drafted a 30-day notice terminating their tenancy at will. She printed it on paper that matched the spine I rediscovered in the courtroom. We served it with a plate of pot roast because I will not let other people make me mean. Colton read the notice, snorted the way people snort when they want to sound braver than they are, and said, "We have rights." "You do, to your own apartment." He slammed the hallway door the way boys do when they learn life's volume knob isn't theirs. Brooke came to me with a potted peace lily and an apology that looked almost like sincerity. "If we pay rent, can we stay?" I said, "You can stay if you respect me. That includes market rent, your name's on every delivery account, no more quiet hours in my living room, no more borrowing my car because it's efficient." "Market rent?" Colton laughed. "In this economy?" "Exactly," I said. "Welcome to adulthood." They lasted 6 days. You can buy a lot of peace in 6 days if you decide to. On day 3, they asked for an extension, and I shook my head. On day 4, Colton parked his truck across my driveway like a dare. I called the non-emergency line I used to route. The young deputy who showed up had the good sense to tilt his hat to me and the good sense to ask Colton to move his truck. On day 6, they packed the pickup with bundles of their life and Tank's food bin and a box labeled "Kitchen Must-Haves," which I knew contained an air fryer and 3 different spice blends that all tasted like disappointment. Brooke hugged me in the driveway and went smaller in my arms like the child I used to carry on my hip at the county fair.
"I'm sorry," she said. Her voice dropped to a whisper you use with babies in goodbye. "I thought I was saving you." "I already saved myself," I told her, "and I hope you save you too." Tank drooled on the passenger window while Colton stared straight ahead. The truck rattled away. The house closed behind it with a puff of quiet so soft I almost mistook it for sorrow. I sat in the kitchen, hands around my mug like a prayer, and noticed the hum of my refrigerator was a comfortable pitch again. Someone had turned my life down to the appropriate setting. Day 1 after they left, I walked to Parker's Diner on Main and ate pancakes with pecans because I wanted to. The waitress with the piled up hair called me sugar and kept my coffee hot. A couple from church slid into the booth behind me and asked how my azaleas were doing, like it was the most important thing in the world. In a town like ours, sometimes it is. I bought a Ring doorbell because Darla insisted, and a locking mailbox because Jillian suggested. I changed my Wi-Fi name to NO Free Wi-Fi here and told no one the password. I put a fresh line dance schedule from the senior center on my fridge where the care plan used to be. And I took my mail key out of my purse and held it to the light like it was a jewel. People underestimate how shiny a small, ordinary thing becomes when someone tries to take it. 2 weeks later, a certified letter arrived from my bank, the kind that asks you to sign by the X while the mailman waits. It confirmed my credit freeze, my new debit card, and a blocked attempt at a 2 a.m. purchase of $849 of wellness supplements destined for a different zip code. I smiled with my teeth and texted Darla, "The world is predatory." She texted back a row of knives and a heart. My church girls came over on Thursdays. We quilted in the den while a Law and Order rerun hummed like a metronome in the background. Darla said if I ever decided to sell quilts, we'd make a killing, and then reminded me we don't sell things we love. We send them home with people who earned a warm blanket by sitting through the cold with us. Sometimes I set an extra plate at dinner for Darla. Sometimes I set one for just me, and it felt like company anyway. I got used to the sound of my own choices again. I took a line dancing class at the senior center and messed up my grapevine so spectacularly that the instructor laughed until she bent in half, then taught me a way to count steps that made my feet learn quicker than my mouth. Darla and I walked the greenway in the morning, her yellow lab Daisy, pausing at every smell like reading a neighborhood newsletter. I fixed the wobbly cabinet hinge in my pantry with a YouTube video and a screwdriver, and then sent a picture to my cousin with the caption, "Woman with a tool and a temper, approach with pie." Sometimes, because habits take their time leaving, I'd sit on the porch and watch the road and think of every person who'd called me in a panic when I worked at the 911 center. And I'd whisper, "You're going to be okay, sweetheart." Then I realized I was the one I was talking to and smiled like a person caught singing to herself at a red light. I still saw Brooke in line at the grocery store with ramen and a bouquet of grocery store daisies, tired around the eyes the way people get when their best plans run face first into life. I nodded, she nodded. Time passed like a good soup. Slow, heat enough to cook, not enough to scald. One Sunday after church, she found me on the steps with my program folded into a paper fan. She had cut her hair shorter, like a woman ready to carry less weight. She said, "I'm sorry." No performance this time, no Hallmark card voice. Just a tired niece with a soft mouth and honesty finally showing up like a late guest who still gets a seat. "I forgave you," I said. Forgiveness, I learned, is not a spare key. It's not a lease agreement. It's not a blank check. It's more like a porch light you can see by without inviting someone to move back in. She asked if she could come Tuesday for chicken pot pie like when she was little. "You can," I said, "as my guest. Bring a salad." Tuesday night, she brought a real salad, spinach and strawberries, and a vinaigrette she whisked in my kitchen, not the kind of salad the internet makes with crushed chips and guilt. We ate at the kitchen table I bought on sale at Sears in '92, wood scarred with rings from every coffee mug that has loved me. We talked about work and rent and the way adult life keeps arriving with more envelopes than anyone ordered. She asked me if I ever get lonely, and I said, less than I did when my living room was full of people who treated me like furniture. And we both laughed, not cruelly, but like people who have finally started telling the truth. The county sent me a survey about the court experience as if it were a restaurant meal and not my life. I filled it out and mailed it back with a stamp that had a cardinal on it. I wrote, "Thank you for regarding my life as mine." I think sometimes government forgets, and sometimes family does too. In July, Jillian called to say a file had been closed. "How does freedom feel, Miss Carter?" she asked. I said, "Like pancakes with pecans on a weekday, like a mailbox key in my palm, like the quiet hum of a refrigerator that belongs to me." I still keep my "bless your heart but be nice" mug by the coffee maker.
When I hold it in the morning, I think about how those two ideas can live together if you keep a boundary between them. People can be blessed and also be told to behave. That boundary is the dignity line, and I walk it every day the way you walk a familiar hallway in the dark, and don't stub your toe because you know where your life is. Sometimes I sit with Darla on her back steps and we teach Daisy to shake paws with both hands. And Darla will say, when control loses access, it rations compassion. And I nod like I'm in church, because that's the truth. When people can't get what they wanted from you, they start calling you selfish for keeping your own breath in your own lungs.
Brooke found an apartment near the Beltline with a tiny balcony and one of those washer-dryer combos that takes your patience for a long walk. She sent me a picture of her first set of keys on a ring, and I wrote back, "Proud of you. Don't tape a care plan to your own fridge, sweetheart. Tape a grocery list. Tape a joke. Tape a quote that keeps you honest." She responded with a laughing face and a heart and a picture of Tank sleeping on his back like a grandpa in a recliner. I still keep my front flower beds tidy. I still wave at the UPS drivers because any person who brings you what you ask for deserves a kindness. I still say hey to the estate sale truck when it rattles past because I decided not to give it the power to make my stomach drop. My mailbox key lives in the porcelain dish by my door, along with the quarter I keep to scratch off a lottery ticket if I'm feeling like a gamble. I queue up line dance tutorials on my living room TV and count out loud when no one's there to tease me. I bake a chicken on Sundays and refrigerate half and take Darla a plate if she texts that she's got a double and is carb depleted and cranky. Sometimes I write my own little care plan and tape it up for myself, not with blue painter's tape, but with a magnet I got at a yard sale that says, "Be sweet, but be smart." My plan has 5 lines. Wake, coffee, move your body, do a thing that makes you useful, do a thing that makes you smile. It works better than the one Brooke made because it was written by the person who will live it. The last time I saw Judge Alvarez, not in court but at the farmer's market, because this county is smaller than it looks and judges need tomatoes like the rest of us, she asked me how I was doing. I told her I learned a truth I wish they'd put on the courthouse wall in big letters where everyone can read it before they file a paper that might change someone's life. Love, I said, isn't control. Help isn't a leash. And dignity isn't something you're handed in a ruling. It's something you patrol in small, steady ways, like locking your mailbox and telling your own story out loud. She smiled, picked up a cluster of tomatoes and said, "Put that on a quilt, Miss Carter," which, coming from a judge, is as close to a legal endorsement as a sentence can get. On Tuesdays now, Brooke comes over around 6. She brings salad, and we eat pot pie, and she tells me about the boss who makes her alphabetize files that were born to be messy, and the neighbor who thinks quiet hours apply to his leaf blower. She pays her rent on time to a landlord who is not me. She returns my containers when she remembers and texts apologies when she doesn't, which is appropriate repentance for a person learning. She turns off my porch light when she leaves and locks the door behind her because she was raised right, even if she took a detour. Sometimes she asks me, "Do you ever think about that day in court?" And I say, only when I need to remember what my voice sounds like in a room where someone would like to borrow it for their plan. We always end the night the same way. She stands in my kitchen doorway with her hand on the frame, like she's trying to memorize the shape of something she wants to give herself. She says, "I love you," and I say, "I love you more." And we both mean it. The meaning is different now. It's love with the leash removed. It's love that doesn't arrange chairs around control and call it care. It's love that can sit with another person's decisions without thinking it needs to decorate them. One afternoon in early fall, when the light goes slant and everything looks like a memory of itself, a woman from church stopped me in the produce aisle and put a hand on my arm. She said, "I watched your video." Darla had bullied me into telling my story on camera for the church seniors group, and then the little video went around like a sheet cake at a funeral. "I needed to hear it," the woman said. "My son tried to take my checkbook. He said it was safer, and it took me a month to realize he meant safer for him. I bought a locking mailbox. I called my doctor. I feel like someone slid my life back across the table to me with my name on it." I touched her hand and thought about how the smallest things can feel like rescue. How a mailbox key chills your palm like a winter coin. How a judge saying petition denied can sound like a lullaby. How the first quiet morning after chaos leaves can feel like your house remembered your name. I went home with my groceries and put my tomatoes in a blue bowl and my milk in the fridge and my bread in the bread box and my mail key in the dish by the door. I stood in my kitchen and listened to the familiar hum of a life I get to decide. The refrigerator breathed. The clock ticked. A neighbor's wind chime clinked. Somewhere down the street, a lawnmower started, that steady midsummer growl. I poured coffee into my mug and held it in both hands, and I said out loud to no one and everyone, "My name is Ruthie Carter. I live in Wake County, North Carolina. This is my house. This is my mail. This is my life." And then, because a dispatcher always gives a closing line, I added, clear and steady as a good radio, "I'm 1080, in service. You can show me available." Later that night, Darla came over with Daisy for a bowl of stew because nurses forget to eat when they're caring for the whole county. We sat on my porch while the cicadas tuned up like a scratchy orchestra. We talked about nonsense and big things and the way the sky turned that particular bruised purple right before dark. And when she left, she turned and said, "If anybody tries to tape a plan to your refrigerator again, send me a picture so I can laugh. If anybody tries to tape a plan to my refrigerator again, they're going to learn that tape doesn't stick to dignity." We laughed, the kind of laugh that leans on a railing and doesn't fall, and I went inside and washed my bowl and set it on the rack and turned off the porch light. I checked that the front door was locked. I checked that the mailbox key was in the dish. I set my line dance shoes by the door like a little promise to my future self. Then I went to bed, tank-free and content, and slept like a person whose name is on her deed and her decisions, because it is, and it will be as long as I keep saying so.